Hello and welcome to All Top 5s. When it comes to ghostly storytelling, there are few better than the Japanese. From historical folklore to modern day spine tinglers, here are 5 ghostly tales from Japan. Number 5. Ghost Hand. A monk was walking in the countryside to a nearby village called Akiyama. As he was travelling, he heard footsteps behind him, but upon looking round, there was nothing there. He continued on his way, only to hear the footsteps following him again. The monk decided it was probably the spirit of a person that had died out here in the country during a recent drought. He took pity on the spirit, and after his visit to the village, he brought back a sutra parchment with Buddhist scripture on it. The monk waited where he'd heard the footsteps until long after dark and into the dead of night. Suddenly, a pale white hand emerged from the darkness and beckoned slowly to the monk. The hand was all there was, nothing else. Despite his fright, the monk gently placed the sutra in the dead hand and chanted the prayer written upon it. As he expected, the ghostly hand withdrew and departed from the world. This is a spooky tale from hundreds of years ago, and the sense of dread following the footsteps and the creeping horror of the pale, disembodied, beckoning hand really make it stand out. Number 4. The Peony Lantern. Here's a well-known tale that's even been adapted into kabuki theatre. A samurai called Ogiwara, who had lost his wife the year before, looked out of his window one evening and noticed a beautiful woman walking by with a young girl who held a peony lantern. He immediately fell in love with the woman, whose name was Otsuyu, and pledged his eternal love for her. Every night after that, Otsuyu and the girl would visit Ogiwara's house and leave before dawn. A neighbour who noticed this with suspicion decided to peek into Ogiwara's home and saw the samurai performing sexual acts with a skeleton. A priest was brought to Ogiwara and told him he must resist Otsuyu's attractions, laying a protective charm on the home and praying outside it. That night, the woman and the girl couldn't get into the house because of the charm, and Otsuyu called to Ogiwara all through the night. Eventually, Ogiwara couldn't resist any more and came outside to her. The girl with the lantern led the couple back to Otsuyu's grave in a nearby temple, her home, to make love. The following morning, Ogiwara's corpse was found naked and intertwined with the skeleton of a woman, while another smaller skeleton with a peony lantern lay nearby. Chilling and repulsive at the same time, this ghost story has been popular in Japan for centuries. Number 3. Tokyo Taxis. Here's another classic. In the city of Tokyo one night, it was absolutely pouring with rain, and a taxi driver was doing good business. Everyone wanted a dry ride. The cabbie picked up a young girl who had hailed him near the big cemetery. She was completely drenched and seemed very sad. They drove in silence to the destination that she had given. Upon arrival, the girl didn't get out of the cab, but instead asked to wait there. She stared up through the rain at one apartment for 10 whole minutes, watching the person moving about inside in the light. She then suddenly asked to be taken to a house back near the cemetery, and the driver obliged. A little unnerved, he kept silent and focused on the rain and the road. Once he had pulled the car up outside the house the girl requested, he felt glad the strange journey was over and turned round to collect the cab fare. The seat was empty, except for a deep puddle on the seat where the girl had been sitting. She had vanished. A knock on the window made him jump then, and the man who lived in the house was there with the exact taxi fare for the driver. He told him the young girl had been his daughter who had died in a car accident years ago, and that some nights she came back from the dead and travelled to visit her boyfriend's apartment, then asked to be taken home. The cab driver stayed away from the cemetery ever after. Number 2. Black Hair. Many years ago, a poor samurai lived with his wife in the capital. He was summoned to battle by a distant lord and gladly accepted, leaving his wife and taking a different woman who he fancied with him. After he'd finished his service and returned home late one night, he longed for his wife again. Guiltily, he entered his hut, but found his wife greeting him and welcoming him back, rather than being angry for abandoning and cheating on her. The happy samurai promised never to leave her again. His wife beamed with joy, and they went to bed together in each other's sweet embrace until sleep took them. The next morning he awoke with a terrible shock to find himself embracing a dried-out corpse with nothing but withered flesh on its bones, and wrapped from head to toe in long, black hair. He scrambled out of the hut and ran to a neighbour. "What happened to the woman next door?" he asked them. The neighbour replied, "Long ago her husband abandoned her. She was so deeply upset that she became ill and died soon after. As no one who cared for her was around to give her a funeral, her body is still in the place where she died." It's a chilling tale, and it's so sad too, but those are often the best ghost stories. Number 1. Blind Revenge. Many years ago, a samurai by the name of Hotsumi visited an inn on his travels. When he got to his bedroom, he heard a beautiful voice singing a song and decided to find her, thinking she would be just as beautiful. Asking about the inn, he discovered that she was a blind travelling musician and found out which room was hers. Filled with lust, later that evening he waited for her in the dark. When she returned, he leapt out and ravished her, which she very much enjoyed. In the light of the following morning, he found that she was terribly ugly, a shock to Hotsumi. Although the blind woman seemed enchanted by him, he'd made a plan to dispose of her. The samurai led her up a mountain road later that day and pushed her off the road to her death into a ravine. A year later, the wicked, self-serving Hotsumi had completely forgotten these events. He was travelling in the same area and stopped to rest one night at a temple. He was awoken by a ghostly entity who pointed down at him and said, "Have you forgotten? You played with me and cast me aside when you'd had enough. Although I have no eyes, I see you now." Then she grabbed the terrified Hotsumi by the ankles and dragged him out of bed in a rage. The ghost was impossibly strong and the samurai couldn't fight her, watching helplessly as she dragged him outside to a nearby graveyard. She paused for a second in front of one grave, smiled, then grabbed Hotsumi in an embrace and disappeared with him beneath the cold earth. Monks who had heard the commotion followed the trail the next morning and dug the grave up. In it, they found Hotsumi's mangled body, completely wrapped up in the bones of a skeleton. It was that of the woman that they had found dead in the ravine a year before. And that's it from all top 5s for this week. I love a good ghost tale, and if it has roots in cultural or historical folklore, then so much the better. Let me know if you know any traditional ghost stories from your country. Just let me know in the comments, but remember when you're discussing these things, just be polite and considerate in the comments. I'd like to keep everything civil. If you've enjoyed this video, please do click on like, it really does help me out. And you can subscribe for a new video every Tuesday on all different topics. So peace and love to each and every one of you, and I'll see you all next time on All Top 5s.